Hello everyone, I'm Alan Hyde and welcome to the second episode of BARC'ing Mad, the official podcast of the British Automobile Racing Club. Now if you're a motorsport fan and new to BARC'ing Mad, then I can tell you you've found the right place. Every 2 weeks we're going to be here to bring you the latest news and results from within and outside of the club, as well as talking to some of the biggest names in motorsport. So with all of that explained, let me introduce you to my BARC'ing Mad co-host and also the tan-lined co-host after the weekend, Ian Waterhouse. Hello, Ian. How's the old tan line getting on?
Thanks for that intro, by the way. If anybody didn't see me, I've got quite a nice tan going on. If anybody's watching the stream at the weekend, I've been likened to a drumstick lolly. I wasn't quite prepared for the sun to be as powerful as it was, and I did forget my sunscreen. So, oops.
People can be cruel, can't they, Ian? And now, before we get started, it's time to tell you all about our fantastic partners. Invest less on fuel and more on winning. The BARC'ing Mad podcast is proud to be in partnership with the BP Fleet Solutions UK. BARC members that sign up for a BP Plus fuel and charge card will have access to fuel at 3,400 stations with up to 6p per litre off at 1,200 petrol stations across the UK on both standard and ultimate fuels. Now, whether you're a business owner that operates a small fleet of vehicles, a race team, or if you're self-employed sole trader heading to race meetings at weekends, the BARC BP Plus fuel and charge card provides special discounts and competitive prices covering standard grade and ultimate fuels. Now, you can sign up for this exclusive BARC member benefit and start saving on fuel by heading to bp.com/BARC.
Yeah, it's an absolutely fantastic benefit, isn't it? And there are more on the way as well. Right then, I'm ready. Alan's always ready. So let's do what we do best and talk all things motorsport. This is the BARC'ing Mad Podcast.
As always, our opening stint of the podcast sees us look over the latest news and results from around the BARC. And what better person to join us to discuss such things as someone who's been watching and writing about the club for a number of years, Chris Ashby. Great to have you here, Chris. Just exactly how many years is that now? You've become a feature of the paddocks.
I have. Firstly, thank you for having me. I think I first started, 2016 was when I started with the BARC. So,
Wow.
Almost as long as you, Alan. Almost. And we'll leave it at that.
Not quite.
It was quite interesting, actually, because when you joined the paddock, you had more than a passing resemblance in my eyes of Sebastian Vettel. So I think for a couple of years, I didn't learn your name. I just called you Seb.
And I was perfectly happy with that as well. I'm almost...
So you should be.
Potentially, I might go back to that, grow my hair out a bit, and then see if anyone else picks up on that.
Grow your hair, wear an Alice band. It'll be absolutely fine. You can be absolutely sure of that. Well, let's kick things off with a little bit of celebration, shall we? Because Alton Park, earlier this month at the BTCC meeting, the Rocket F4 British Championship, certified by FIA, reached a significant milestone, didn't it, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. 250 races for any championship, I think, is definitely cause for celebration. And like you said, they reached that at Alton Park just earlier this month. I think we've probably been there for all 250 races, Alan, in the paddock at some point. An incredible championship, especially, it presents itself as the kind of the first step on the ladder to F4. To Formula One, sorry. It's got a proven track record. You've got Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, and Logan Sargent. They're all products of British F4. And then even beyond that, you've got, Dan Ticktum's out there doing bits and bobs. Colton Herta's over in IndyCar. So, there's so many drivers that have come through the ranks. I mean, the numbers are impressive as well. From those 250 races, there's been 96 podium finishers, 69 different race winners. So, it's a fantastic proving ground, and it's a championship as well that I know the BARC are very proud to kind of be associated with it being a British championship as well.
It's been very competitive this season. You said the number of podiums. There's been 18 different drivers on the podium heading into Silverstone this weekend. But quick quiz for you, Chris. The 250th race, that was won by James Higgins. Do you know who won the first ever British F4 race?
Okay,
in
2015. So I was going to say Dan Camish then, but then with that 2015, you've now prompted me to think that was MSA Formula. I mean, I will go with what I imagine would be the obvious answer, but I don't think it might be right. Is it Lando?
It is. Congratulations,
What's
Lando
my prize?
Yeah, picking up the first ever one.
Oh, fantastic! I'll take that.
And I have to say, we were there. I know Alan was there at the weekend. I was there as well. And actually, congratulations to Josh Erfan, the rookie. He picked up his first win in the first race as well. So even more winners. Those stats are just getting bigger and bigger
Absolutely. Now. And I mean, I think just due to how the championship is formatted, like you say, 18 podium finishes this year. I think the season high for drivers has been 23. So, that's an incredible stat that pretty much 70.5% of the grid have stood on the podium this year. So, and I'm sure we've still got 4 events of that championship to play out this season. So I'm sure there'll be a few more that will get up on the rostrum at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, we had the pleasure of seeing the action, but it's the perfect segue, really, to look at what was a memorable 2 days at the home of the British Grand Prix, because there was a couple of other championships racing too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think any time an event is on at on the Grand Prix layout of Silverstone, it is really special. Just the heritage of the circuit for one, but also the nature of that near 3 mile layout really lends itself to some great racing. And I think that was seen on the live stream at the weekend. The British Endurance Championship were there. And it was a fantastic battle between the Aston Martin Vulcan and the Peter Urseg, Marcus Clutton Audi R8. And it was such a shame to see the Aston sadly kind of have to retire late on. But to see those monstrous kind of GT cars in their element, and hear them as well. That's the thing.
And hear them. The noise of the Vulcan.
I can imagine that Vulcan. You guys were obviously in the national pit lane. You probably would have heard that out by the wing. It's that monstrous and loud.
All the way around.
All the way around.
Yeah.
So, I just think that was some great racing and for Clutton and Urseg to win by 2 laps. Really kind of stamp their authority on the championship as a whole, because they've really been kind of credible contenders from the get go. But others, you go from, I think what the beauty of the BARC and its like plethora of championships is that you go from watching proper hardcore GT cars to then you've got like some fantastic caterhams that are 7 abreast down the back straight. They're finishing less than 1,000th of a second between them over the top 3. So it had everything, and there was some really great racing there.
I asked the question of 2 of the Caterham drivers that finished one race with, what was it, 11,000th of a second between the 2 of them. And I asked the question because I genuinely wanted to know the answer. When you cross the line with another car that is 11,000ths of a second behind you, do you know you've won?
I know.
How do you know?
If it was me, I'd just go full commitment on the in lap and then just have to then put a face on if I wasn't the winner. I think you've just got to front it out, basically.
Well, I think they found out when they were pointed to the number 1 board and the number 2 board in Park Vemma. That was the first they knew of it. It's incredibly close. It was a brilliant weekend, actually. Absolutely superb weekend. Had nice weather.
But the thing is,
well.
though, if you look through all of the results from the Caterham races this year, that's the general theme. I don't think there's been a race. If there has been a race that's got more than a second between like the top 3, I'd be very surprised, and you'll definitely be able to count them on one hand, because that is the nature of Caterham racing. It's literally just slipstreaming, wheel to wheel, literally down the straights, round the corners, everywhere. It's fantastic.
Absolutely. On the Sunday, we had the Britcard Trophy race as well, and I think actually Alan and I probably got to do a little bit of grovelling to Jade Edwards, because she did the first stint with Mike West, came into the pits, and I know, Alan, you spoke to her first, didn't you?
I did, yeah. And it was she took pole position in the morning and led the race for the entire duration of her stint. It was superb. And also, from a personal point of view, I've known Jade since she was born. And it was really nice to see because she struggled this year to get luck on her side in the BTCC. So to have a regular grid position towards the back of the grid immediately swap round, I felt so good for her. And then it all fell apart within just was it a lap, 2 laps after the car went out after the driver change and gear change, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, the compressor went, and so unfortunately, Mike West, who was running the car, essentially, he got about 2 or 3 laps and had to retire the car straight after. Alan, we'd both spoken to Jade and saying what a perfect first stint it was. So I kind of think we might have to say sorry next time we see her.
I just felt incredibly sorry for her, Ian, because it was she's. I think what was the phrase she said to me? This is life, right? That was the phrase that she used, and the highs and lows of motor racing, eh?
But Chris, there's plenty more action taking place over the past few weeks as well, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've said it to a couple of people. Like, traditionally, at the moment, it feels like there isn't much going on in terms of. I don't know if it's because, obviously, for me personally, working in the BTCC paddock, we're in a summer break almost. So now it feels like, right, we've all down tools. But actually, there's still a lot going on. So, just a couple of weeks ago, we had the Thruxton Historic meeting, and that's a fantastic event for everyone involved. It's a real kind of takes the venue back to its roots and has some real vintage machinery there, both competing and on display, and doing demonstrations as well. I think you had kind of the polar opposites of Formula One there at display. You had Red Bull racing, and then you had some real, like, really old school stuff as well. So that's fantastic, and that event's only growing as well. It came in as a celebration of the venue's 50th anniversary back in 2018 now, I think, and it's only got better and better from there, from then. And another event that happened was Coventry Motorfest, which that hasn't taken place since 2019, I think, definitely before COVID. It was supposed to happen last year, and then it was postponed due to the Queen passing away. So, and that's a real special event for the club as well, because the Midlands Centre, headed up by Chris Hall, they really curate a lot of the sprint element of it, where the ring road is almost closed off, and you've got a full sprint event basically taking place. So, that's a really cool event that's happened as well. There's just been a lot going on.
There's quite a big event going on at Brands Hatch as well, wasn't there, with the legends and the pickup trucks?
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime legends are out, you've got to watch it. And I think that was underlined a couple of weeks ago when they were at Brands. 5 different winners from 6 races. It's just. But I was listening to episode 1 with you guys the other week when you were speaking to it with David Whedon, and there's not enough kind of plaudits you can give legends, because it is the most mad racing, but in the best way possible. Like, I've never really reported on it from having to write a proper race report for it. But if I did, I think I'd probably have a small nap in between writing it, because I'd need to rest my brain to be like, right, okay, well, lap 1 there was about 14 different leaders. Lap 2, none of them were even in the top 10 because they all moved backwards. It's just crazy. But yeah, so they were at Brands Hatch. They always provide great entertainment there. I'm looking forward to seeing them up at Croft and Knock Hill late July, early August, because I think they're going to be great. And then pickup trucks. Dale Gent had 2 wins. Paul Tompkins was also in the mix towards the front, and that's a nice championship battle that's bubbling away quite nicely at the moment.
Now, Chris, maybe we can talk about something that's dear to both of our hearts, and that's the Quick Fit British Touring Car Championship. We're at the halfway point. I can't quite work out how we got to this halfway point, because it seemed to go in an absolute flash. Now we've got this interminable 6-week wait before we get racing again, and I'm sure the second half of the season we're going to be at Brands finale before we know it once again. But maybe we could get your thoughts, the half-term report.
I mean, first of all, it is a bit, it has just gone. It feels like about a week ago we were at Donington Park for the opener, and now suddenly we're 5 events in, with this long break. We do have the 2-day tyre test next week, I think, which is a nice little kind of, teaser for the second half of the season. In terms
a touring
of
car fix is what you're trying to say,
yes,
Chris. A
yeah,
touring car
yeah,
fix. It gives us all a bit of a boost.
exactly. In terms of a half-term report, I'd say it's been as expected from the perspective of the usual suspects in the mix. You've got Ashley Sutton, Tom Ingram, Colin Turkington, Jake Hill, all just jostling towards the top. I think I've got an opinion that a few others have probably got in the paddock, that I feel like we're witnessing something very special at this moment in time, that we all need to kind of take a step back and appreciate what we're seeing in British touring cars, which is
Couldn't agree more.
being Ashley Sutton, because I feel like we've seen him come from, he started out in Formula V, went up to Formula Ford, Renault Clio's, now he's touring cars. We've seen him progress, and I feel like we're watching someone that hasn't even reached the peak of his powers yet. He's that special, and the conversations I'm able to have with him and his engineer Tony Carosa, just getting an insight into how they work, what they're doing. It's very special. It's very rare that you get this kind of perfect blend of car, engineer, driver hooked up, and to see him doing the records he was doing earlier in the year, six wins from 8 races. He's almost kind of he'll make, if you ask him, which I'm sure you have, Alan, he makes no bones about it that he's out for every single record going in British touring cars. He's not gonna he wants to, when he's done, he wants to be at the top of every single thing, even to the point where after Flux,
ultimately he wants to beat Andy Rouse and Colin Turkington and win more titles.
Exactly.
And then, only then, is he going to think about what maybe he moves on to after that.
I feel like we're witnessing something very special with how he's performing, but equally, it's just as special watching the likes of Tingram, who is the reigning champion, Turkington, Hill, keep with him, because they're only within striking distance. If you look at it on paper, wow, Ash won 6 races the first half of the season. He should be miles up the road. But that non-finish in the reverse grid at Alton Park means he's only got a 6-point lead at the moment, which is, that is touring cars in a nutshell, basically. So I think, there's the usual suspects are in the mix, and there's a lot to play for. And I'm really intrigued to see how, when we get back to racing at Croft and Knock Hill, are 2 real on-the-edge circuits. And as we've seen down the years, a lot can happen at those venues. So I'm really intrigued to see how it plays out, and just see how much the ante ups, because they're going to be probably on it even more.
Chris, you've touched on the sharp end there of the grid, but tell us a little bit how the Jack Sears Trophy is shaping up.
Yeah, that's shaping up really nicely as well. That competition's open for drivers who haven't had a podium in the championship before. Dexter Patterson is leading it at the moment. I don't even think he's had an outright weekend win. I think he's just been there chipping away, punching in the points, which is what you need to do. That is touring cars. Whether you're at the top or the bottom, it doesn't matter. That's what you need to be doing. So he's chipping away, but then you've got the likes of Sam Osborne, Andrew Watson, Mikey Dober, all there. So I think that's a really really fun battle that we're going to see, progress as the year goes on.
And we can't talk about current touring cars without casting our minds back to previous years of the BTCC. It's been such a successful championship in so many different guises, so many different models of touring car that we've had over the years. And we can enjoy those. We can celebrate them this weekend, because we've got a big weekend, the inaugural weekend of the Super Touring Power Festival at Brands Hatch this weekend. Some amazing people are going to be there. Some amazing machinery is going to be there. It's the first time we've ever done it. And boy, am I looking forward to this weekend, Chris.
I will join you in looking forward to it. I am literally, I'm bouncing off the walls and counting down the days. I'm like, I have 2 children, and I'm probably the most excited person in the house this week, I'd say. It's crazy. I don't think I've been to, so touring cars for me is always been the sport that I've, the discipline of motorsport I've loved the most. And to now be able to, to see what Brands Hatch are doing in terms of bringing together Brands Hatch and the Classic Touring Car Racing Club, bringing together this feast of kind of nostalgia is going to be incredible. You've got Alain Menu in person, and then his 1997 Williams Renault Laguna there. It's I could sit here all day and just reel off the cars, the people that are going to be there. Yeah, it's going to be amazing. And props to Stuart Kai at the Classic Touring Racing Club, because they've all played a really integral part in this event. And it's not just about the Super Tours at Brands. There's going to be, whilst they've got races both days, there's also going to be the whole kind of Classic Touring car championship ranks there. Everything from pre-66 right up to pre-03. So there's going to be some fantastic racing, fantastic demos. Yeah, I'm buzzing. I can't wait.
Now, I can say actually as well, Chris, for anybody who's not able to get to Brands Hatch this weekend, I believe on Sunday we are going to be live streaming it as well. So on Sunday you will be able to tune in and watch it. I think we'll be running around doing commentary and presenting for that one too. So if you can't get to Brands Hatch for any reason, I believe you'll be able to watch it on BARC TV. But there's still a lot more coming up as well. And looking further ahead, we have another major event too coming up at Thruxton, haven't we? Convoy on the Plain. That's going to be an absolute stormer, isn't it? What can fans look forward to seeing on July the 8th and 9th, Chris?
I mean, if watching 1,000 brake horsepower trucks go around the fastest circuit in the UK is your cup of tea, then Convoy on the Plain is the event for you. Yeah, it's just a bit bonkers, isn't it? Really, just truck racing. Flying around Thruxton. So yeah, they're headlining it with 5 races, but there's a packed support race package as well in terms of Kuma BMWs, MG Owners Club, Caterham Graduates. They're all there as well. But one of the beauties with Convoy is that it's just as much about what's happening off the track as on it. So there's a lot of fun for all the family stuff. So we've got the show truck displays. I think there's some form of Transformers, which I'm sure will be very intriguing to see. I don't know how that works or what that entails, but again, that will be definitely worth the entry fee alone. And then there's monster truck rides. So yeah, there's just a lot going on.
There's driver signings as well, isn't there, Chris?
Yeah.
If you want to meet the truck drivers, you can do. They're handing out these posters and they'll sign it for you. It's going to be a real family weekend, isn't it?
Absolutely, and that's one of the things. That's the beauty of these kind of weekends as well. They do make it all about the family. It's not just about the racing. So yeah, it's definitely one. It's the Convoy kind of truck events as a whole have been growing over the past few years, and we had a fantastic one at Pembrey in May, and this one promises to be just as big.
And my experience is that the youngsters absolutely love the trucks. They adore the trucks, and the drivers are brilliant with them. So great family event. Now, I did spot this on the official BARC social media channels over the course of this week, Chris. And this is a really important thing, because obviously we cannot go motor racing without our valued volunteer marshals. And I understand that we need a few for some of the remaining meetings, so they're not all fully subscribed at this point.
Absolutely, and yet, like you said, without the fantastic volunteer marshals that give up their time to ensure that we go motor racing, none of this would happen. So there's race meetings starting in July 22nd at Donington Park. There's remaining race meetings over the course of August, September, and into October. That a few more marshals are needed to kind of just ensure that the meeting runs as smoothly as possible for everyone involved. So we're encouraging marshals to kind of get involved if they can, if they're able to, by signing up via RevUp online, or by contacting the club themselves. There's incentives as well within it. So all of the marshals, no matter what BARC event it is, they're always all provided with a free breakfast and drink. And then the club are also working on some additional gifts and incentives just to kind of ensure that the marshals being looked after, which is obviously very important.
And they're good race meetings, Chris. They're really good race meetings. There's a couple of British Endurance Championship meetings. There's Caterham racing. So these are you'll see great racing.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. you'll see great racing, and the fingers crossed is that it'll be safe, fantastic racing, and you'll just get to enjoy it from the side and not have to get too involved with anything, other than maybe the odd green or yellow flag potentially. So yeah, no, some fantastic racing as well. But yeah, so obviously we're well aware that we aren't the only club that goes motor racing in the UK. Obviously there are hundreds of clubs that are doing the same stuff as the BARC every weekend. So, any marshals that are available and willing to give up their valuable time is greatly appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. Big up the Orange Army, I say. Well, thank you so much, Chris. That was fantastic. Some great insight there into latest track action and news from BARC. Chris, again, thank you so much for joining us. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me. And yeah, hopefully we'll chat again soon.
Right then, Alan, let's switch gears now as it's time to be joined by another guest to discuss some of the hottest topics in motorsport from around the world.
You're right, Ian. And joining us today is a highly regarded motoring journalist that is a senior contributor to Autocar and to Motorsport magazine, writes weekly for Goodwood, quarterly for Magneto, and is the co-founder of the Intercooler. Welcome to the BARC'ing Mad Podcast, Andrew Frankel. Do you get any time off? That's a lot of things that you're doing during the week, Andrew.
Yeah, not much. I did a strange thing. I went on a thing called holiday the other day, which was not something I'm very familiar with these days. But yeah, I mean, I just like being busy.
No, surely not.
And
No.
also, yeah, I mean, in this strange world we live in, particularly if you're self-employed and freelance, if there's work there to be done, I kind of think if I don't do it, it'll never come back. So yeah, I just get on and do as much as I can with it.
And I bet when you went on holiday, you never switched your phone off. None of us do.
No, I worked every single day. But at least the sun was shining and I wasn't at home.
Yes, I thought, rather thought you might have done. Now, before we delve into some of the major motorsport trends, we've got to say a big congratulations to you, Andrew, because the Intercooler recently scooped 2 prizes at the annual News Press Awards. Well done. Congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah, well, I mean, thank you very much. We were chuffed. Particularly if you see some of the people that we were, I mean, all the big players for the awards we went for, the sort of the Top Gears and the Autocars and that lot of this world. And so what did we win? We won the Consumer Publication and the Best Digital Publication awards, which were the 2 that we entered. We did, in fact, one of our contributors, David Tewig, entered the 3rd. But it was all stuff that he'd written for us, and he won that too. So yeah, I mean, we're just absolutely stoked. It's more than anything else, I'm glad we're getting noticed and that people are starting to appreciate what we do. It's a huge fillip for us, and it makes us want to go on, harder and stronger.
What is the website, Andrew?
Okay, so the website is the-intercooler.com. And the idea behind it is that every single working day, we deliver the kind of automotive journalism you might pray to find in a magazine like a quarterly. So the best possible motoring journalism that there is from the best possible team of motoring journalism delivered every day. And that's it. We don't have any advertising, which means we get to write what we want to write rather than what our advertisers want us to write. And we have gathered an extraordinary team around us, drivers, engineers, designers, journalists, all picked simply because they're the best at what they do. And between us, we generate all our content and we post it on the -intercooler.com, which is both a website and there's an app, so you can take it with you wherever you go. And we, like you, are also a podcast as well. So if you look for the Intercooler podcast on all the usual platforms, you'll find us lurking there as well.
Am I right in thinking as well that you've got a partnership with BARC as well, so club members can access the Intercooler?
Yeah, I mean, our partnerships are incredibly important to us, which is why we only, and you can go on the website and you can see the list of partners and you'll see what I mean. We only partner up with people with like-minded organizations. We won't partner up with anyone just because we think we might be able to squeeze some money out of them. We partner with yourselves, with Motorsport UK, with Bicester Heritage, with Footman James, with Bonhams, all proper blue chip organizations with proper histories and proper people, full of people all doing it for the right reasons. Because A, frankly, that's what we want to do, and B, we're very aware that our partnerships reflect, and the choice that we make reflect on us. And yeah, and BARC has been a partner of ours since the start. I can't remember what the exact subscriber deal is. You probably know better than me, but yes, if you want to subscribe through BARC and through that partnership, we'd be absolutely delighted to have you on board.
Right now, Andrew, we've invited you on today to talk about world motorsport. So let's get into it. And what better way to start than with Formula One? Red Bull Racing chalked up their 100th win in Canada. Max Verstappen, his 41st, to tie with Ayrton Senna. This is pretty amazing. And of course, behind Red Bull Racing and the design of the car, a BARC gold medal winner in 2010, Adrian Newey, and his quite incredible Formula One designs. This is quite a thing we're seeing this year, isn't it?
It is. I mean, it's extraordinary. And I think it just goes to show, if you look in previous years, you know, where it's happened, and you think back to, I don't know, 1988, when McLaren with Senna and Prost won 15 out of 16 races. It's never one thing. You have to have three components, and they all have to be firing correctly. So you need the driver, you need the car, and you need the team. And I think that's the combination we've got at the moment. When you've got a driver like Max in a car that's designed by Adrian Newey and a team which, you know, by and large gets all the strategy calls right, and is very, very, you know, it just makes them very, very hard to beat. And I think the only thing that they're lacking at the moment is, you know, if you look at, you know, Senna in '88, he had Alan Prost as his, well, not his wingman because they're at each other's throats, but nevertheless, I don't think that Sergio Perez is quite at the moment performing the sort of the number two wingman role that Red Bull would like, which does make Max vulnerable. It's the reason, actually, because there's so much talk, isn't there, about, oh, you know, Red Bull are going to win every race this year. I don't think so. I just don't see it, because stuff happens, whether it should or whether it shouldn't, and cars get unreliable. Cars, you know, we've seen it, haven't we? Get taken out by other people's strategy mistakes take place. Weather turns up, all sorts of reasons. And the problem with that is, if you're Max, if you haven't got someone literally parked off your right shoulder, fending off everybody else, it makes you very vulnerable. So I think they're doing amazingly this year. But, you know, I read a piece about this recently about whether they'd actually go on and clean sweep the entire season. And I don't see it. Also, it's more difficult now than it used to. I mean, it's only ever been done, I think Alfa Romeo did it in 1950 in the inaugural season. And I think Ferrari did it in 52. But these were races where there were 6 events or 7 events. You've got 22 this year. So I think, just statistically, I think it's really, really unlikely. And for myself, I think, you know, and I speak for all motor racing fans, you know, wherever your allegiances lies, even if you're a Red Bull fan, I don't think you want them just to walk away with it, do you? I think you want a bit of competition. You want a bit of sport. I mean, when you get in a situation where the most exciting contest is for who's going to come second, you know, there's something not quite right with it.
There's going to be a point, isn't there, where Max Verstappen probably isn't going to finish a race at some point. So are we confident that Perez is going to be there to pick up that win, and it's not going to be a Mercedes or a Ferrari?
I'm not remotely confident, no. I think that, you know, there's a couple of things. You know, firstly, I think Mercedes probably have the strongest team. If you look at both their drivers together, I think George and Lewis are an absolutely outstanding pair. Probably in the best run team. It seems that they've actually managed to design themselves a car which is fully competitive. And, you know, and the thing that I always say, which has been borne out year after year after year, is that nobody develops a car through a season like Mercedes-Benz. You know, Mercedes-Benz have won championships without having the best car at the start of the season on a number of occasions. Yeah. And it's partly because they're an amazing team, but it's also partly because, you know, they do better with the raw material than anybody else. Now, it remains to be seen, doesn't it, just how much of the money they can spend under the cost cap has already been spent developing this new car, and how much latitude there is to go forward and develop it even further. But yeah, I don't think Perez is there. Nearly, you know, not when you've got Lewis and George, you know, increasingly snapping at Max's heels. I think, you know, if Max makes a mistake, or Max gets taken out, or Max breaks down, my money would be on one of those two. You know, winning the race, not Perez.
I need to just ask one question of you, Andrew, because you've said that maybe Perez is not being the wingman required. Who would you put in the car? Who would you put in the second Red Bull if Sergio Perez was not in it?
Well, it's an almost impossible question, isn't it? Because there are so many drivers out there, from Fernando to Leclerc, who are just better drivers. But whether they would be happy to be cast in a number 2 role, I think someone like Sainz actually would be interesting, because I think he knows in his heart he is a really, really, really great Formula One driver, but not in the the Lewis, Max, Ayrton, Michael league. And I think he'd be a sort of So I mean, you want someone who is absolutely solid and is going to put in decent performances, but who understands what his role in the team is. I mean, I think that Mercedes had that a bit with Bottas, who, for whatever he used to say about I'm not number 2 driver, I mean, he clearly was, and I think he performed that role quite well, not brilliantly, but yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It is quite the quandary that Christian Horner and co might have to work out sooner rather than later. Right, now we did mention it in our last episode, but of course it was such a race, wasn't it? Such an occasion. Le Mans 24 hours. Andrew, what did you make of it all?
Oh, do you know what? I was so... Well, firstly, I wasn't there. I think I've missed 3 in the last 30 years, but because of this holiday thing that I went on, which was the only time my wife and I could both get the time off work, and it happened to coincide with the centennial of Le Mans, which is not great, is it? As for the race itself, which I obviously followed incredibly closely and delved into, I'm completely torn, because a huge part of me is absolutely delighted. I was delighted that it was such a close race. I love the fact that Ferrari won it 50 years after they last took part. There's a bit of me that thinks it's not a bad thing that Toyota's total dominance of that event has come to an end, but at the same time, I'm not comfortable with the way that it was done. I'm not comfortable with the authorities handing Ferrari an advantage, which they said they wouldn't do, which amounted over a 24-hour period to a number of seconds faster that their car would go relative to the Toyota, which were fewer than the number of seconds by which they won the race. So I'm very, very torn. I don't think beyond places like this podcast and what I do out there in the wider world, I don't think it really matters very much. I think people just love the idea that Ferrari won the race, and maybe they don't understand balance of performance, nor should they really, and the machinations and the politics and everything else that goes on backstage. They just saw a great motor race and a Ferrari win it. Terrific, wonderful, fab. And there is a lot that the enthusiast within me absolutely agrees with them, but the journalist, yeah, I struggle with it. I find it really difficult because cut me and I bleed Ferrari. I always have done. I've said this many, many times before. I love it when Ferrari wins.
Yeah,
but I am uncomfortable with the way it was done this year, and I don't blame Ferrari. There have been suggestions, haven't there, that Ferrari threw the first 3 races of the season so that they could get the most optimal balance of performance for Le Mans and win it that way. Well, no, I just don't believe it. I just don't believe it. But they did say that BOP between the hypercars would be set before the first race, and it wouldn't be changed until after Le Mans. And then what was it? 3-4 days before the test day, they changed it, and I don't think they should have done that.
Right, Andrew. So we've been talking about Le Mans, of course, and something quite special. You're going actually this week, aren't you? Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So depending on when you're listening to this, I head out to the Le Mans Classic on Wednesday. I'm racing a supercharged blower Bentley there in the Le Mans Classic over the course of the weekend. It's Bentley's car. Bentley are keen for me to point out that it's the first time a factory Bentley has entered a race at Le Mans since they won the 24 Hours in 2003, which is a bit bizarre. But it's one of their continuation blowers. So it's one of these. No, well, indeed. It's one of their what they call the continuation blowers. So they made a run of I think 12 cars very recently, which were identical in every single way to the car that Tim Birkin raced at Le Mans in 1930, which actually means we'll be completely uncompetitive because we will have nothing on our car, which is in any way other than what was there in, whatever it is, 93 years ago. But it doesn't really matter because the car, although it is a new car, it is completely authentic. It drives in exactly the same way as it would have done back there. And yeah, I'm incredibly excited. It was a great privilege to be asked. It's a great responsibility because obviously I need to look after the car, but I also need to do everything I can to help and support the team and not make them look like idiots for choosing me to put me in the car. And I haven't raced there for dozen years. So the first thing I'm going to have to do in practice is figure out which way the track goes. But I think I've probably watched enough of the 24-hour race to know that. I'm just really, really excited. I haven't been to the Le Mans Classic for years. It's such a wonderful event. I think if you're a true car enthusiast, I don't know if I can say this, but I think it's true. I think the Le Mans Classic is actually an even better event. You just get passionate car enthusiasts who love looking at all the cars from the era, because I think it goes from this year, I think it goes from 1923 to 1981. So everything that could have raced at Le Mans up until the advent of Group C. So, you're talking about everything from Porsche 935s and 917s back to, either the engine vintage Bentleys like I'm racing. And it's, I'm really, really looking forward to racing. I'm really looking forward to being part of the team. But actually, as much as anything else, I'm just looking forward to being down there, wandering around the paddocks, drooling over all the cars and seeing some really, really good racing.
And for sure, they're not the simplest of cars to drive at the best of times. So good luck this weekend, Andrew. Enjoy every single minute. I'm sure you don't need me to advise that for you. You'll have a wonderful time. Better than going on holiday.
It's like all things that are unfamiliar. If you don't know how they work, they can seem quite sort of daunting and formidable. But actually, okay, the pedals are the wrong way around. So you've got an accelerator in the middle and the brakes on the right. That's quite an important mistake not to make.
Yeah.
The gearbox doesn't have any synchromesh, so you need to be a bit mechanically sympathetic. But don't forget, things happen much more slowly. The braking distances are enormous. It doesn't go around corners like a car with downforce. You have a lot of time to think about this stuff. So with familiarity, and I've driven a few of these sorts of cars over the years, it's a very particular thing. It's a very peculiar thing. But I think once you figure it out, I wouldn't say in and of itself it's a particularly difficult thing. Frankly, otherwise I wouldn't be doing it. So it's just fun.
I think it was very much the pedals that I would struggle to get my head around, but best of luck anyway, Andrew. I'm sure
I'm the same, Alan. I don't know how you do that. I'd be slamming the brakes on every 2 seconds.
I'm afraid we all would. Andrew is a very accomplished driver, so he'll be absolutely fine. Now, in the USA, the FIA Formula E Championship continued its current campaign. Andrew, as a motoring journalist, I'm sure you're tasked with testing a variety of vehicles that are aimed towards sustainability. So firstly, I think the first question is, what do you make of Formula E? And also, what is out there in the real world that can transition into motor racing, do you think?
That's a really interesting question. What do I make of Formula E? I'm going to disappoint someone here. I've tried and tried and tried with it, and I just struggle. I know that they have amazing drivers, and I understand why they're trying to do it. I applaud the reasons behind it, but ultimately as a fan, I go to watch great motor racing for the spectacle and for the emotion, and I just don't see. I think an awful lot of the problem is the sorts of circuits that they choose, and I understand that city centre circuits, why they work, why they get the kind of crowds that you'd never ever get going to that kind of race out at a traditional circuit. I just don't find it very interesting, I'm afraid, which probably makes me, some kind of, stick in the mud Luddite. But yeah, that's kind of the way I feel about it. I'm very interested in the whole sustainable fuel thing, particularly from the point of view of motor racing. I mean, anything, frankly, that allows us to keep internal combustion engines and allow us to continue to hear multi-cylinder engines and gear changes and all that sort of stuff, which to me is part of the fabric of motor racing. While at the same time, clearly taking into account that we do need to change the way we do these things. I am massively in favour of. I watch Formula One's attempts to clean up their act with interest. I do find it. I don't know. I mean, you can put whatever kind of fuel you like into a Formula One car, but if you do insist on flying from Europe to North America and then back to Europe again on consecutive weekends, the emissions that you get from that kind of activity will dwarf anything you're ever likely to achieve on track. So I think you need to. You can't just have clean cars. You've got to have a clean sport and clean in every single respect. If that's what you want to do, and what I would do. I was talking to we have Karun Chandok as one of our contributors, and he is a big fan of putting, environmentally friendly, sustainable fuels in, V12 engines. If you're going to go down that road, because I think that so often with these things, it's because manufacturers who have road cars to sell have such vested interests, and this is what lies behind the whole Formula E thing as well. You just forget the fans, and think about what do the fans actually want to watch. So, I mean, I'm quite interested in things like Extreme E. I was out watching the Dakar Rally earlier in the year, and saw the Audi hybrid Dakar car, which is an amazing thing to watch. I am interested in, and I do keep abreast of the various innovations, but yeah, Formula E itself, it just doesn't quite do it for me, I'm afraid.
Well, I'm going to say, Andrew, it'd be remiss of us not to talk about one of the biggest events both for the automotive and motorsport industry that's coming up. It is, of course, the Goodwood Festival of Speed, presented by MasterCard, taking place from July 13th to the 16th. Now, BARC actually play an integral role as well of that, providing marshals and officials. I take it you're looking forward to it, Andrew.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't miss it. I wouldn't miss it, and B, it's work, so I'll be there effectively twice. So I'll be there for the duration from Thursday to Sunday. It's just an incredible spectacle, isn't it? And I think this year, because there are so many Goodwood anniversaries, there's the 75th anniversary of the first motor race at Goodwood. It's 30 years of the Festival of Speed, and I think I've driven something at every one of them. And also, where are we at? 25 years of the revival is this year as well. So this is Goodwood's really, really big year. And, knowing the Duke, as we all do, he is bound to pull out all the stops for this year and really, really make it an event to remember. So, I mean, weather willing, I just can't wait. It's going to be an absolutely amazing event. Always is. Yeah, I've been very lucky. I guess it's because it's what I do, and people sometimes think that they want stuff written about their cars. But yeah, I raced at the first revival. I took part in that crazy dash across the track race. I was 25 years younger than I am now, and that was a fun thing to do. And I've been at most of the members' meetings, toddling around in various mad things and doing demos and racing very old cars. So I've done everything from driving a Can-Am Porsche 917 to racing an Edwardian car around there. But it's just great, isn't it? I mean, that's one of the things that I love about
I want your job.
The members thing is that you just get that incredible scope. I mean, that kind of sort of anything goes approach. And it's the same. And it's the same with the Festival of Speed. I mean, you will never. I mean, there are other massive race meetings around the world, but there's nowhere where you can go where there isn't a form of motor racing you can be into which isn't going to be represented there. And I love that about it.
And where else in the world, Andrew? So a couple of years ago, I got booked to work for Goodwood at the Festival of Speed, and they said, could you do a couple of sort of lengthy interviews for us, filmed, to go into our archive? We've got a few very special people that are going to be at the festival this year. Could you do sort of sit down interviews? You can talk about whatever you like to them throughout their career. So I said, yeah. And then I got the list through. An hour with Mario Andretti, an hour with Emerson Fittipaldi, an hour with John McGuinness, and an hour with Sir Jackie Stewart. Where else in the world could you possibly get an opportunity to do something like that?
Well, you just couldn't, could you? You couldn't pay to do that. It's I'm incredibly jealous. It's a unique opportunity. I have so often found myself.
I'm jealous of the pair of you.
I've so often found myself. You go and drive up the hill, and it's always fun. Somebody once said to me, I think it was Tony Dron, when advising someone how to drive up the hill, that you're always on the wrong side of the risk to reward ratio when you're driving up there, because the only run that anybody will ever remember that you did is the one which you go off on. So I tend to take quite a cautious, defensive approach to it, while also just trying to put on a bit of the show at least. But the bit I love, and it's the bit which makes me feel so lucky and privileged, is actually when you get up the top. And, you're just sort of sitting there, you've done your run, you're running it through in your mind, and then all these other cars start turning up around you, and all your heroes start getting out of them. And there's nothing else you can do up there. So you just go and talk to, these people that you've revered all your life. And discover that they love what they're driving as much as you love what you're driving. And there's an extraordinary sort of sense of camaraderie up there. And, I think that most motoring journalists like me feel like imposters most of the time, particularly if you do a little bit of racing, and just because of what you do for a living, you get to hobnob with some pretty impressive people. And there's always a bit of you which is just sitting there thinking, I really shouldn't be here. I really don't deserve any of this. But up there, when people come up to you and go, oh, what's the car like? How's the run? For a minute, you can kind of kid yourself that you belong. And I love that. So that's always for me one of the great highlights, if you're lucky enough to be driving at the Festival of Speed.
It's amazing, Andrew, and it's quite right that it should be included in our review of global motorsport. Thank you so much for joining us for this segment. It's been fascinating to hear where you're going, what you've been doing, and your plans. And once again, congratulations on the awards. Just so I can remind you, if you are a BARC member, then you can gain access to the content on the Intercooler website. Believe me, it is well worth doing so. So for now, Andrew, thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully you'll be a friend of our podcast and join us again before the end of the season.
Thank you, Andrew.
Oh, it's a great pleasure to come on. Thank you very much for inviting me. Look forward to catching up with some more, all of you, Goodwood, Le Mans, Thruxton, wherever. Thanks so much for having me on.
Andrew Frankel, everybody, here on the BARC'ing Mad Podcast. So the final bit of our BARC'ing Mad podcast, we get a very special motorsport guest on to shoot the breeze, to have a chat about all things motorsport. And I'm delighted to say that we've got a great guest this week, an incredibly gifted driver, a huge personality, and a complete liability with a microphone. So we thought he was the perfect guest to have in this slot for our second issue of BARC'ing Mad. He's got a book which documents his racing life. It is called For Flux Sake, Beer, Fags and Opposite Lock. The perfect title, Ian Flux. And it's great to have you with us. Who came up with the title?
Tiff Niddell in 1980. Well, I'm sure you're all aware, if you follow racing at all, that I've always had For Flux Sake on my helmet ever since the end of 1980. So it seemed appropriate we should call the book after it. But Tiff invented it.
Did he? Did he really? Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Now,
okay. So when I was racing for Dr. Ehrlich in Formula Atlantic, we used to have a little aluminium shroud on top of the cockpit that blew the air over my helmet, so the helmet on my head, so it didn't rock about. And so it just said Flux. And then Tiff was racing that day as well, and he got a felt tip pen and put For and Sake either side of it. Tiff then went, oh, that's a great sticker. I'll get some of those made up while I'm abroad. and came back with a pile of them, and we've had them ever since.
How cool is that? The book was written with a great,
Especially as it did the forward to the book.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I've yet to see a copy of the book, Ian, but it has been promised to me because it was written in collaboration with a good friend of mine and a great journalist, Matt James, the editor of Motorsport News. Could you possibly, just as an introduction to the book, Fluxy, tell us how you went about the writing process? And did it take place in a pub?
Of course it took place in the pub, and we did about 28 hours altogether in the pub.
Not in one go, I hope.
No, gone on those days. I'm 67 now, not 21.
So let's talk a little bit about what goes into the book, Ian, if you don't mind. Does it take us through the racing career from day one, being a gifted young single-seater driver, and the journey starts there?
Well, my first race, the day after this podcast goes out, hopefully on Friday, my first ever senior race out of karts was July the 1st, 1973 at Lyddon Hill in Formula V. So that's 50 years ago this Saturday. And then I've done another 754 in between.
Wow, congratulations.
Have you been counting all of those?
Yeah, the result from Lyddon Hill was, oh, sorry, I need to turn this off. Yeah. The result from Lyddon Hill was I qualified fourth, but crashed on the last lap of practice heavily, so I never started the race. We had to put it on the trailer and bring it home.
So that kind of prepared you, Fluxy, for what was to come in the ensuing years of a motorsport career, the highs and lows of motor racing.
Well, it started off with a good low, but then it did improve a bit after that, and then it's been up and down ever since.
And one of the features
was a lot of fun.
Yeah, an awful lot of fun along the way, and a lot of so because you've mentioned that, I'm going to mention this as well. You've made a lot of friends along the journey, and that kind of came out in pretty recent years when you damaged your ankle, didn't you? And someone put together a crowdfunding page to keep Fluxy ticking over while he was incapacitated, and that was a lovely thing.
Well, especially as it was Martin Short, who is the guy I've raced with most against in my life. We've done over 120 races against each other and hated each other quite a lot during that period, because I've shoved him into the wall and things. And for him to be the instigator of that really showed me that, you know, there are real people who care, and Martin's one of those. And I was amazed that we got 10 grand in 3 days, which more than kept me ticking over while I was recovering.
Wow. So as far as racing is concerned, Fluxy, can you pick out the highlight championships that you've raced in that no doubt are documented in the book?
Well, my best championship for the most competitive, most fun on and off the track was TVR Tuscans, and I did that from 94 to 99. But nothing really came close to it. Touring cars was a bit, sadly, when you're tossing around at the back of the field in a private car, it's not quite as much fun as winning, I found out.
Yeah. No, I fully get that. You made friends with Alan Gow, didn't you, during that period of time, the boss of the BTCC?
Very good friends with Alan Gow. And sadly, my do at the RAC club has been cancelled on this Thursday. And I had to speak to Alan about something about 3 weeks ago. And without hesitation, Alan said he'd be there for me. I was very honoured.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's got better things to do than come and watch me.
Well, I think you'll be surprised, actually, because very early on, after he said he was coming along, he told me that he was coming, and then with disappointment told me that it wasn't going ahead. So that was for the book launch, Fluxy. So have you got a plan now of where you might have the book launch instead?
Well, it wasn't really the book launch. We were piggybacking, so I found all this out now. We were piggybacking with the Goodwood members and the RAC club members, because I was only actually allowed to invite 10 guests. Well, I could have brought 60 guests had they given me sufficient notice, because the reason it got cancelled was they'd only had 39 acceptances from those two clubs, and that wasn't going to fill the room. And the smaller rooms were already booked for June the 28th, so it got shelved.
But more importantly, have you worked out whereabouts you're going to have a sort of a replacement do? Because that's going to be some do with the people you're going to invite.
Well, we're discussing at the moment the BRDC for the touring car, the Saturday night of the touring car meeting there.
Oh, that would be great. That would be absolutely superb. And you can bet your bottom dollar that Alan Gow will attend that one as well.
Yeah, I'm sure he will. But Rebecca and Eric Verden-Rowe are in charge of all that. I was very lucky to be even asked to do a book. So, publicity-wise and everything, I'm in their capable hands. When I raced the McLaren F1 GTR and won the British Championship in '96, wow. I should have done a deal with Jake, who I shared the car with, for 1% of what he sold it for, rather than just getting $1,000 a day, because he bought it for 400 grand off Ray Bell and sold it for 8.5 million in June 2013. And I went down with Lucy last May. We got invited down to sit in it and start the car up by the current owner, who paid 22 million for it.
That's something special, isn't it? Goodness me.
Yeah. What an investment! You couldn't change that into a house from 1996.
No.
I don't think a semi in Newport Pagnell these days is worth 22 million.
I think you're absolutely spot on. When you get into a car nowadays, Ian, that you raced back in the day, as you've just described, does it sort of scrape away the years? Is it just like being back in the time itself?
Yeah, I honestly, when I started that McLaren up, because I only said it as a joke, I said, could I start it up? Yeah, go. And I honestly became emotional in moments. It's ridiculous over a car that I hadn't sat in since October '96, but I didn't think they had that sort of effect on you, but they do.
After all these years, the years just fade away, don't they? And you see all the bits that you remember from back in the day inside the car, the noise, everything about it. We're not going to give too much away about the book, because we want people to get the book and to read the book, because you know it's going to be.
I've got no pension. That's why we've got to do this.
So this is the pension. So this is the plea. We're doing it on your behalf, Fluxy, and we will continue to do so. But you're more than welcome. But dare I ask about one particular excerpt from the book, from New Zealand, newspapers in New Zealand, and rather making the headlines over there. What was that all about?
Well, we came third, which was our best ever result in New Zealand in 1980, and obviously to be on the podium in an Ehrlich, everybody was made up for us. Anyway, in due Flux fashion, we had a bit of a celebration, and in the early hours of the morning, as I was going up to bed with a load of other people, Dick Bennett's and his team for Dave, who were running Dave Oxton, decided they'd hold me down, and there was an ice machine in the hotel corridor, hold me down and cover me with ice. Anyway, so they did that. And I'd done this loads of times in England, so I thought I'd just give them a bit of a shock and lit up a cigarette and just stuck it in the sprinkler system, and just thought that would get a few rooms wet. I only had it on for about 10 or 15 seconds, but sadly, there's the electrical system or whatever's a bit different down there. Nobody could turn it off, and it flooded the whole hotel. The police obviously duly arrived and arrested me. And then I was stuck in this in the local Christchurch police station thing but I was in there with like 4 or 5 Hell's Angels, big lads, all tattooed up bikers, and I thought, oh shit, this is going to be uncomfortable. Anyway, I told them what I've just told you, and I seemed fairly accepted then, so I wasn't going to get the kicking I was expecting. But I had to go into court in the morning and then back into court in the afternoon, and the camera, the local news cameras were there and everything. And I got far more coverage from flooding the hotel than I ever did for coming third at Wigram.
But, Fluxy, you made...
I think 5,000 New Zealand dollars. And Dr. Ehrlich very kindly paid it for me.
Wow.
I never made any fuss about it at all. I think he was just so pleased that we'd come third, and 5,000 New Zealand dollars was well worth it.
Right, Ian, let's just touch a little bit more on the book. As Alan said, we don't want to give too much away, but it really is going to be a treasure trove of stories, isn't it? And there's just one more I wanted to touch on. And it's about the time you managed to out-qualify yourself at the Spa 24-hour race. Tell us more about that.
Well, I was driving for RD Motorsport, and their team manager was Malcolm Swetnam, who I knew well from running Rob Gravitt in British touring cars the year before. Malcolm we had 2 cars, a rental car and our car, and the deal for there was 3 Belgian drivers, and the deal was that they paid a third before we left England, a third after qualifying, and a third after the first hour of the race. I don't know who organised that, or anyway, it was about 11:30 at night, and we put our car away, and then Malcolm said, oh shit, Fluxy, these boys haven't qualified, we're going to have to qualify. Jump in the caravan, and Ken Grundy, who I think was a part owner in all the cars, he was quite a short bloke, but with quite a big head. And Malcolm said, just go and put Ken's overalls and helmet on, and don't talk to anybody, just wait in the caravan. When I give you the sign, just come out the caravan, through the garage, and get in the car and go. But Ken's, obviously, Ken being probably about 5'6", it was quite tight in his overalls lengthwise, all right around the waist. But his helmet was the biggest issue because his head was so big, I'd like to spin it round. Anyway, Malcolm said, we've got 1 lap, so new tyres on, and it was like 10 to 12. And to cheat a bit there in those days, you could, the timing beam was after the hairpin going down to Eau Rouge. So if you went right off the track and pretended you'd outbrake yourself, and you could turn right at the top of the hairpin, which probably give you another 4 or 5 miles an hour. So I did all that, did the lap, and Malcolm said, right, when you come in, just get out the car and do reversal of what you did getting in. Don't talk to anybody, etc. Anyway, did the lap, came in, and I wandered past the 3 Belgian blokes who were all looking at the TV screen thinking, hey, our car's just gone up to 7th and we're all still here. How did that happen? So I pushed myself down to 8th from 7th.
That's brilliant.
I got an extra 1,500 quid for it.
Goodness me. The book is absolutely rammed with these kind of stories. It is, I'm sure, a wonderful read for anybody that loves motorsport. For Flux Sake, beer, fags, an opposite lock. And Ian Flux, thank you so much for joining us here on the BARC'ing Mad Podcast.
I've no doubt.
And thank you for having me. But may I just add that there are far more interesting stories in the book than we've just discussed that probably you don't want your children to listen to.
Yes, we've opted for the non-PG option for this one. So
yes, I can see. But just to encourage people to buy it, they were rather tame compared to what
they are. Typical Fluxy stories. They are typical Fluxy stories throughout the book.
Oh, it was having never done it before. Every step was like a step into the unknown. Oh, Matt was really good in guiding me, but also making me think and really test my memory. And my kids always said that I'm quite good at remembering things, but by association, we talk about something, and then you'd suddenly remember something else.
Yeah, it leads on.
I really enjoyed it. It was a great experience.
Well, we've really enjoyed enjoying your motorsport career, Flux.
And obviously all the beer we had doing
it. Yes, I understand that there were there were some fairly late mornings after a session with Fluxy down the pub, but that's not for the first time between you and Matt James, that's for sure, and I'm sure it won't be the last.
No.
Fluxy, thank you so much for joining us here on the BARC'ing Mad podcast.
I hope this new podcast goes well for everybody. I hope there's a few more BARC members enjoying it.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, and so do we, Fluxy, and with it's an overused word, the word legend, but you are a legend within the world of motorsport. Thank you so much for joining us. Few more like Fluxy on the podcast, and we'll be going viral. Don't you worry about that. Ian Flux, everybody, great to have him here.
Thank you all very much. Lovely to meet you all.
Well, that's all we got time for in this episode of the BARC'ing Mad podcast. But before we go, here's another message from our fantastic partners. If you're en route to race or spectate this weekend, don't forget that the partnership between BARC and BP Fleet Solutions UK goes beyond conventional fueling solutions. BARC members can now embrace the transition to electric power more easily. Thanks to the added convenience and savings offered by the BARC BP card, visit www.bp.com/BARC to find out more. Thank you again to our BARC partners at BP for supporting the UK racing community.
So if you've not signed up yet, then make sure you do, as it's well worth doing. Before we're back on the airwaves, there's plenty of club competition to savour, including the Classic Touring Car Racing Club topping the bill at the Brands Hatch Super Touring Festival this weekend. And then Convoy on the Plain, which is headlined by the British Truck Racing Championship at Thruxton on the 8th and 9th of July.
Oh, yeah, there's certainly a lot to be excited about over the next 2 weeks. So, well, from myself and Alan, we'd like to thank you for joining us again here on the BARC'ing Mad podcast. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks for episode 3, where I'm sure the Formula One British Grand Prix will be a big topic of conversation. In the meantime, don't forget to stay up to date with all the latest news on the BARC website. And until next time, goodbye.